Hi Sagittarius, this is Tisch Aitken, and this is your monthly report for the month of June. There is a lot at play, and we begin the month in eclipse season, and eclipses always bring major turning points and endings and revelations and a lot of change in a very short period of time. At the end of May, there was a lunar eclipse. It was actually a total lunar eclipse that took place at 5 degrees and 25 minutes of your sign, and it occurred on May 26th. And this can induce major changes, major endings, bringing things to light. Maybe there have been things that you've been working with or working through for a while, and it's been something that perhaps you've either avoided or you've just dealt with it, and finally this eclipse really shook it up. And eclipses wake you up. They're like wild cards, so it could have brought a major turning point, completion, or an ending, or sometimes, because eclipses are like wild cards, they can come in out of the blue and really invoke a lot of change in a really wild way that you had no way of seeing. And so that's why the ancients used to fear eclipses, but they can also bring in excellent opportunities and good news out of the blue. I've seen all of the above happen. So we are in eclipse season. You are the sign feeling it the most, aside from Gemini. And as we begin June, Mercury is no longer out of bounds, which it was from May 7th until May 30th. And when a planet is out of bounds, it exceeds, it is beyond 23 degrees and 27 minutes north or south of the equator, and it doesn't pay attention to the rules, and it doesn't play by the rules. And so Mercury was out of bounds. It's been in Gemini, transiting in your house of relationships and partnerships since May 3rd, and it will be there until July 11th. And so it's a long time to have Mercury transiting in any sign, not to mention the sign it rules. And it can be very clever and tricky in Gemini, so there is that trickster component. And when it was out of bounds, that was really going a little nuts. Mars was out of bounds up until May 24th, and that could bring erratic behavior as well. Then we had Mercury Retrograde on May 29th, just a few days after the lunar eclipse, and it retrograded at 24 degrees and 43 minutes of the mutable air sign of Gemini in your house of relationships. And it's going to be in Gemini until July 11th. It will be retrograde until June 22nd, when it stations direct at 16 degrees of Gemini. So a lot of focus on your house of relationships, around partnering professionally, socially, romantically, and in friendships. A lot of networking and a lot of focusing on partnering with yourself and really finding what makes you happiest. And part of this lunar eclipse was releasing the blocks that are keeping you from finding your real truth and finding happiness in this new world. And let's see, so in the beginning of the month, there's a lot of mutability. Venus is now out of bounds. She became out of bounds as of May 27th, and May 23rd rather, and she will be out of bounds until June 18th. So she's acting wacko too. So let's see. So we begin the month. A lot of focus on relationships, a lot of focus around home and family as well, because Jupiter, which is the ruler of your sign and is the grand benefic, entered the mutable water sign of Pisces, where it will be until July 29th. And it's transiting in your house of home and family and emotional foundation. This is a really excellent placement for Jupiter. Jupiter loves being in Pisces. It's in its dignity by ancient astrology, but it also loves transiting in the sector of home and family. It's exalted in this house placement. So that's a really nice energy, and finding contentment in a very unpredictable world, and hopefully working on home, on if you have your own business, this can bring ample opportunities for making money and expanding your business. It can also be good for selling or for buying real estate or for moving or fixing up your place, getting enjoyment through home. So that's a really nice energy, and more mutability in the sky because Pisces is a mutable sign. So on June 2nd, Venus, which is the planet of love and beauty and how you earn money, enters the cardinal water sign of Cancer, where it will transit until June 27th. And it's transiting in your 8th house of intimacy and unblocked wounds, as well as joint resources and money and debt and assets. So this is a good time for focusing on your money, fixing up your debt, and also hopefully bringing in some money. And then on the 3rd of June, we have nice energy because the sun in Gemini forms a trine to Saturn in Aquarius, and the sun is transiting in your house of partnerships and relationships, and this is a good energy for structuring professional agreements. It's good for stabilizing certain things you're trying to accomplish. And later that day, Venus and Jupiter are both in harmony. Venus is transiting in your 8th house of intimacy and sexuality and money as well. And it's trining Jupiter, which is transiting in your house of home and family. And that can be excellent for issues around family and certainly financial opportunities and for feeling content. On the 5th of June, we have more challenging influences because the sun, at 3:05 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time, Mercury, which is retrograde in Gemini, already in a tricky placement, squares Neptune, and that can uncover deception. It can make things very confusing or just make things, delayed. And Neptune is transiting in your house of real estate and home. Later in the day, at 3:45 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time, Mars opposes Pluto, and that for you could be issues around financial situations or power playing, but not the easiest energy, so kind of lay low on that day. On the 10th of June, the solar eclipse happens, and that's a big deal. It occurs at 6:53 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time at 19 degrees of the mutable air sign of Gemini. And this new moon eclipse takes place in your house of relationships, and that is like a new moon on steroids. It brings a lot of new beginnings and really honoring that energy, focusing on setting intentions, saying affirmations, focusing on what you want to initiate and bring into your life. But it's not ideal to target the eclipse if you can avoid it. If something comes in to your life out of the blue, that's a huge opportunity. I don't care if Mercury's retrograde, take it. There's certain things you may need to revise, then you do so. But otherwise, if there are things you want to begin, start doing the research. Mercury in retrograde is an excellent opportunity to do so. Figure out what you want to commence in your life, and definitely a lot of focus for you around real estate and relationships and partnering, but maybe figure another date after the eclipses wane and when Mercury goes direct, which is later in June. But this is a lot of focus for you. If you're single, excellent time for meeting new people and entering relationships. If you're in a partnership, good energy for being in a partnership and a lot of focus there for you. And also great energy and opportunities to network professionally. So good energy all around. And on the 11th, later that day at 8:37 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time, the moon meets up with Mercury and helps to translate the messages of this new moon. Again, there's so much information pouring through in the month of June, with Mercury driving this solar eclipse, Mercury retrograde in its domicile, and ruling all of this Gemini energy. And at 11:13 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time, the sun meets up with Mercury and also brings more information for all of us to process. When the moon goes void of course that day, it does so at 1:38 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time with a square to Neptune. And Neptune is also a key player this month because it rules the planets transiting in Pisces, Jupiter and Neptune. And it also made a big aspect with the full moon eclipse in your sign, and it's, you know, working with a lot of this energy this month. So there's a lot of Neptunian influence. So trusting your intuition, but also knowing that things can be tricky, and that that moon, when it pronounces the fact that things may not all be as they seem. Venus is out of bounds, Mercury is retrograde, and Jupiter is expanding the beauty and compassion while in Pisces, but it also expands the confusion and sometimes the deception. So on June 11th, Mars changes signs and enters the fixed fire sign of Leo, where it'll be transiting until July 29th. And Mars in Leo is a fellow fire sign. It's good for you, for getting things done, for feeling optimistic, and for tapping into hope. And it's transiting in your house of manifesting and higher learning and teaching and promotion and travel. This is a good energy for, pardon me, for promoting yourself, for taking classes, teaching classes, and for travel. So a lot of focus, and also on tapping into manifesting and tapping into optimism, with Mars transiting in this very optimistic house and really manifesting house. And then on the 12th of June, Venus squares Chiron, the wounded healer. Venus is transiting in your house of wounds, and Chiron is transiting in your house of romance and creativity. And so it could be that there are wounds around vulnerability or around your finances, but we're all feeling wounds right now with the year we've had. Later that day, in the nighttime, at 10:38 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time on June 12th, or early on June 13th, at 1:38 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time, Venus makes a helpful aspect to Uranus, and that can bring creative and innovative solutions for business and money and love. But later that day, the Sun squares Neptune, and that occurs at 7:40 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time, underscoring more of the Neptunian and elusive energy that's very prominent this month. Listen and guide yourself with intuition and manifesting and daydreaming and paying attention to your guides and messages you're getting in many different ways. But know that this month the energy can go in many different ways. So just go with the flow as much as you're able. In eclipse time, it's hard because there's a heightened sense of anxiety. And then on the 13th of January, see what I mean? We're in eclipse season. I'm not doing this video again because we have all this mutable energy, and I have a lot to tell you. So on the 14th of June, how about, Saturn squares Uranus for the second of 3 times. The first being on February 17th, when they squared one another at 7 degrees of the fixed signs of Aquarius and Taurus, and anybody between 5 and 9 degrees of the fixed signs felt the first one the most. And the fixed signs are Aquarius, Taurus, Leo, and Scorpio. But this time around, they're squaring one another at 13 degrees of the fixed signs. Anybody between 11 and 15 degrees of those signs will feel it the most. Uranus is transiting in your house of work and daily routine. And so this is important for you to focus on how you can structure what you're trying to achieve. And it's not all easy. This is trying to structure a new paradigm. And for, you know, and then squaring Uranus, which is the ruler of Aquarius. And, you know, that's not all easy. And this is happening in your third house of thinking and communication and networking and sales. And so you're trying to structure your thinking in a new time, in the new age of Aquarius, and really trying to learn. A lot of focus on learning for you the next couple of years. And we're all learning major new things with Aquarius is ruled by Uranus, which is the higher octave of Mercury. It's brilliance and innovation, but totally new ways of doing things. So when Saturn and Uranus squared one another on February 17th, that was the day of the power outage in Texas. And unfortunately, that affected millions of people, and it was horrible. And we can see how this can be very explosive energy. And metaphorically and literally, we're trying to contain the chaos as we morph into a new reality. On the 20th of June, there are two factors going on, and it is a big day. To begin with, at 11:06 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time, Jupiter, which is the ruler of your sign, stations retrograde at 2 degrees of the mutable water sign of Pisces. We feel that energy 5 days before and 5 days after. And Jupiter is expanding and transiting in your house of security and emotional foundation, as well as real estate and family. Jupiter will be there until July 29th, and then it will re-enter that sector of your chart on December 29th, where it'll be until May 10th of next year. This is a time to reassess how you can expand through your optimism and manifesting, but also how you can expand your the value of your home, or to help your relatives, or however you're trying to grow in that way. Later that day, we have the summer solstice, and that takes place at 11:32 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time, and that's when the sun is at its maximum declination. And in the northern hemisphere, it's the longest day of the year, and it officially begins the summer season. And when the sun stops and we reflect on what we want the next 3 months to be, in the southern hemisphere, it's the lowest point and the shortest day of the year, marking the beginning of winter. And it's a very significant time of taking action and now new beginnings. And for you, the sun is transiting in your 8th house of intimacy and joint resources and transformation and healing, doing a lot of healing work with this energy. You had Mars there for a couple of months, so hopefully that allowed you to do some and healing work. And then on the 21st of June, Venus, which is transiting in that house of healing and transformation and money, forms a beautiful trine to Neptune in Pisces. And this could be good for financial opportunities and very good for doing healing work and manifesting work. On the on the 22nd of June, Mercury stations direct at 6 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time at 16 degrees of the mutable air sign of Gemini. And Mercury stations direct in your house of relationships. Again, a lot of focus around relationships for you for quite a while, networking in many different ways. And this helps now that Mercury is in its dignity. It will remain in this house for you until July 11th. So now we've got Mercury direct. And then on the 23rd of June, we've got a mixed bag because the Sun in Cancer forms a beautiful trine to Jupiter in Pisces, and that can be very optimistic energy. But later that day, Venus opposes Pluto, and that can bring breakups for you. There could be breakups with relationships, intimate partnerships, but it can more likely be financial because Pluto is transiting in your house of income and Venus is in your house of joint resources. So that's not the easiest energy. And then on the 24th of June, there is a full moon that takes place at 2:40 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time at 3 degrees and 28 minutes of the cardinal Earth sign of Capricorn. And this full moon takes place in your house of income and what you value and how you earn money, and hopefully it brings fruition to projects you've been working on. Now this full moon sets off where the solar eclipse was on December 26th of 2019. So maybe you're getting more information of what you were working with at that time. But this is where the full moon is, and I think the end of the month will be kind of hazy because on the following day, Neptune stations retrograde at 3:21 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time at 23 degrees of the mutable water sign of Pisces. And we feel that station 5 days before and 5 days after. And that can feel very foggy, very confusing. Neptune is transiting in your house of home. Maybe there's confusion with relatives, or perhaps deception gets uncovered, or just misunderstanding. So recognizing that that energy is potent as well. And then on June 27th, Venus changes signs and enters the fixed fire sign of Leo, where it will be until July 21st. So this is nice for you for tapping into teaching and manifesting and promoting yourself. A lot around publicity as well. So I wish you a lot of luck. There's a big time with the eclipses and Mercury retrograde as we begin the month, and Venus out of bounds as we begin the month. So pay attention to all of the news you're receiving and the lessons that are at play. So take care.